Okay, we're going to take a look at the overall trend and a little bit about variability sort of at merit level. So we have the male live bursts, and we have gotten this from New Zealand Grapher, and we have gotten a trend line drawn in that gives us a beginning value for the beginning of the trend line in 2000 and the end of the trend line in 2013. We do not use raw data for this. So we talk about the obvious thing, the specifics, and the evidence for an achieved level trend discussion. So we talk about the fact that it's obviously increasing between 2000 and 2013. And we get into the specifics. What kind of data are we dealing with? We're dealing with a time frame of quarterly data from 2000 to 2013. And we're dealing with male live births, so like 6,600 male live births in New Zealand. So this is New Zealand data. Now we have to talk about the evidence for why we're saying that it's increasing, and we have to talk about the beginning point. And what we haven't really discussed is this little thing in red here, on average per quarter. The trend line smooths out the data so that we don't get these peaks and troughs, and it basically smooths out the data by giving an average per quarter. Remember, there's 4 quarters in a year. And so for quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, it's basically taking like an average. So when you talk about how the trend is changing, you want to use on average per quarter. Some people talk about the actual quarter, like this might be quarter 1 in 2000, approximately the data was here, but you want to use the raw data so much as we want to use the trend line. So it's probably a better practice to talk about on average per quarter. So if I was to write this out as an average, an achieved level trend, overall trend, I would say the overall trend of the graph is increasing between the years shown on the graph 2000 2013. This graph is quarterly data of male live births within New Zealand, and it's increasing. So you need to say it's increasing. And then you need to give the evidence. I know that the overall trend is increasing because when the trend begins in 2000, there are about 70, and you should say there are about or approximately 7,400 male live births on average per quarter if it's dealing with quarterly data. And when the trend finishes in 2013, there's approximately 7,600 male live births on average per quarter. Now, if it was per year or per month, you would say that as well. And we use this on average per quarter because the trend line smooths the data and is showing an average per quarter for each year. And so it's a good idea to use that. Now, that's the achieved part. If you want to go to merits, then you would talk about the variability that happens, because this is not a steady straight line increase over the time. There's been some drops and then some increases and then some sort of steady bits and then some increases again. It's not a consistent thing. There's a lot of change and variability and fluctuation. So you say that. However, there is not a steady increase over the 13 years. The graph shows many variations and fluctuations over the time, and then you speak to those specifically, and about 3 points would be sufficient. So you could talk about 2000, and basically I kind of outlined the fact that you might want to talk about this as a significant change because that's a big decrease. Then you could maybe talk about this big increase up to about that point. You could talk about something in here if you wanted to, something in here, but I kind of used this. Get rid of that. And I used that, and then maybe, I use the steady decrease because we're saying it's increasing, but there's a lot of times when it's not increasing. So you might want to use those 3 bits, but you need to use 3 bits and you need to use them in detail. So from 2000 2002, approximately here, we have a fairly steady decrease from about 7,400 to about, maybe, 6,900 male live births. So there's a fairly steady decrease. The numbers you can estimate. So from 2000 2002, there was a decrease in the amount of male live births. I know this decreasing, as in 2000, approximately 7,400 male live births on average per quarter. There's that value. And then 2002, there was approximately 6,900 male live births on average per quarter. Now, if you don't say this every single time, it's okay, as long as you've mentioned it somewhere in your write-up so that you show that you know and understand the units. The other time from 2006 to 2009, let's just take a look. There's this steady, and I would say it probably stops around 2008 as opposed to 2009. So sort of here, you've got this going on, right? A fairly steady increase all the way up here. So starting around, I don't know, 2006, somewhere around 74, 7,500 male live births, and it goes all the way up to approximately, 70, 83 maybe. Again, numbers aren't important because we're approximating, but from 2006, and I would say that's probably more like 2008, there was an increase in the amount of live births. I know that this is increasing, as in 2006 there are about 7,450 male live births, and then in 2009, don't use raw data, just estimate it, so maybe 7,400 or whatever births, and in 2008, approximately 8,200 male live births. So there's been this fairly steady increase. Now, at merit level, I don't necessarily have to say why that might be the case. Don't know. Was the general increase in births, during that time for males and females, for male live births and female live births, which suggests that just people are having more babies during this time, and why might that be? What was the significance between 2006 and 2008? Why there was a fairly significant jump in male? Does that coincide with the female live births? Does that mean that just generally people were having more babies? Was this a happy time, a bad time? Was this a prosperous time in our economy? Was it a recessional time? What was the reason for that? You don't have to give a meaning for every single thing that you see, but if you can attach some of this, then that would help your discussion. And then finally, from 2011 to 2013, there was a steady decrease here. Again, in the amount of male live births, from about 8,000 to 7,670. This could be because younger women were driving the birth rate down in New Zealand as awareness from contraception become prominent in schools. Maybe some sort of school program, in sex ed, brought into the idea of contraception. And maybe that was the first time they started to really teach it full time. And could you find some reason why there's a decrease? And again, is it a decrease overall of males and females, not just males? This is further shown by the fact that 87% of women use contraception, therefore women were having fewer babies. Is that true of that particular time? So I sort of looked this up. In 2010, Pharmac began subsidizing this Jadel implant, a rod inserted into the arm, which can provide birth control for up to 5 years. So subsidizing that may have made it more accessible to young people and so on, and so that they ended up using that and having less babies. So you can see how you can connect and make this a little bit more interesting story.